Why are boundaries so hard to set? Let's find out today on the art and science of difficult conversations. Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations, where we believe when you communicate better, you live better. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Chris. I own Leadership Potential, where I work with leaders to navigate transitions, rebuild trust, and fix broken cultures by leaning into these hard conversations. And as always, I'm joined with my co-host, Lucie of Mindfittery.
Yes, mental fitness gym for leaders, their teams, and families. So then we can communicate not only having the effective conversations, but also having them while being calm.
And this is something, Lucie, that we've talked about before, boundaries, but we haven't gone into this level of detail because it is such a huge topic. And so I'm excited to have our guest today, Angela Barnes, who brings over a decade of fundraising expertise to her work with nonprofit organizations. As the principal of ADB Strategy, she partners with nonprofits with operating budgets between $250,000 and $1 million, providing specialized development workshops, digital workbooks, and strategic consulting services. She has a ton of great experience, and I'm excited to hear what she has to offer us and help us figure out in terms of boundaries. Angela, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Chris and Lucy. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to diving into this subject with you.
Yeah, what got you so passionate or interested about the idea of boundaries?
So I would say 11 years ago, and then it really hit home two years ago. 11 years ago, I made the transition from for-profit to nonprofit, and I discovered in this it was a different world, not just in language, not just in intent and how we talk to a customer versus how we talk to a donor, but how we conduct business and the boundaries around that. And I noticed in our world, in the nonprofit world, our boundaries are not as strong, they're not as visible, and they're not as welcome as they are in the corporate world.
Hmm. What are some of the things you noticed about the differences in boundaries?
So when you look at the construction of the board, how the board operates, and how the board is to govern the organization and has a direct line to the CEO or the president or the executive director, it's unusual in the sense of the president, the CEO of a corporation being more visible than its board when you look at corporations. But when you look at nonprofits, oftentimes the board members are visible. What's the first thing when somebody asks you to volunteer or asks you to donate or asks you to be a part of the organization? You look at the board. We look at the board
Hmm.
makeup. Whereas when we think about if I'm going to buy something, if I'm going to merge, if I'm going to partner with a corporation, I look at leadership. I look at the president. I look at the VPs. So I
Hmm.
think that mix right there tells us a little something into the psyche of a staff member at a nonprofit organization who they answer to and who has direct lines to them, even though maybe they shouldn't, versus I'm a VP of a corporation and I don't necessarily answer to that board, but I have some engagement with them, but I mainly answer to the CEO and those above me.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's that's so interesting because I see lots of discussion in a bad way about how board members overstep their own boundaries and often try to either in the nonprofit world try to direct staff members to do specific tasks or get information, all of which is they're not supposed to be doing any of that. They're supposed to be going through the executive director, CEO, president, whoever that position is. So that's
Mhm.
a great observation that you noticed.
Well, and to the board's credit in nonprofit worlds, um, we don't have a ton of training for board members. So a board member will
Mhm.
start, there's onboarding, and then they get started. During that onboarding process, even during the recruitment process, very little is discussed of interacting with the team, expectations, things you may say, things you may not say. In other words, boundaries aren't
Yeah.
put in place at the top levels, and it definitely trickles down.
Hmm.
So it sounds like boundaries are really important there, and a lot of people don't think about them when having these difficult conversations. When somebody is preparing for the high stakes conversation, which sounds like it's very in a complex environment, what kind of boundaries they should think about?
So, preparation starts ahead of time and setting your boundaries up so you don't have to have those difficult conversations down the road
Mm.
if they're done properly. So, I look at boundaries as a holistic approach where you have 7 areas of your life that you have boundaries. And sometimes we don't bring those boundaries to work with us because, say it with me now, that's my family. I'm in a dynamic structure. That board member didn't mean that. And you can see it all in a job description.
Mm,
I'm wearing several hats. I have a very fuzzy, unclear role. Um, I may get a call from a board member at night. I may sit with a donor by myself in this person's house when really I should probably go out in pairs with someone.
mm,
The volunteer who's been volunteering for 20 years, and this is just the way she is. And you have to understand that she's going to scream or rant or that he may be curt. We just have to go along with it. So there's usually, first of all, a lack of organizational boundaries. And then that in tune attracts people who don't have individual boundaries. So that's
mm.
why we have to gear up for these hard conversations. And Lucy, there's so many ways to do it, but the effective way is to walk in the door with your boundaries, understanding the boundaries that are already in place with the organization.
Hmm.
Mm. Are there any exercises you think about or have people go through to understand their own boundaries? Because you're right, they may not have those personal boundaries. They might not even know what they should be or can be for themselves.
Well, I am working on a workbook and a book that speaks to this very thing, Chris. And it's taken me a while to create because I had to unpack my own journey in
Mm,
boundaries. I'm not a boundary expert. I'm somebody who's an expert on what it looks like when you don't have any boundaries. And working with women and men who often jump in my LinkedIn inbox or they've heard about me or after I've given a presentation, we've talked in depth about those 7 areas and maybe where they're hesitant to set a boundary because the organization doesn't have a boundary in place or they didn't walk in. So there's a change in thought and they have
mm,
to communicate it. It's easy to set a boundary. The communication part is the hard part. And in enforcing it, maintaining it rather, enforcing is a bad word, but maintaining it, that's the challenge around that.
mm,
So when you have those boundaries, courageous conversations are not really a problem. But when you do not have the boundaries, you have to set what I call an emergency boundary. Lucy, that's when things, and Chris, that's when things get a little hairy.
mm.
That turns
I
into
want to,
crisis communications.
yeah, I would love to come back to the organizational culture piece later. But I'm wondering, what about how do you feel about people who feel like when they set boundaries, it might be imposing onto the other person too much, or they're being disrespectful to the other person in the interaction, like they don't want to be seen as a bad guy by saying, "No, I don't want to set this boundary."
So let me preface this next piece by saying I learned from a mentor of mine. Boundaries sometimes are your ticket into the C-suite. Without
Hmm,
boundaries, it's hard to be considered for a leadership role.
interesting.
Because you're not only not protecting yourself, you're someone who's not viewed as protecting your team or protecting the organization.
Mm,
So I say that, and I preface this with this next comment that it's hard to set those boundaries because sometimes we are people pleasers. Leadership is very different from pleasing the person who's the loudest, the most aggressive, the most insistent, the most persistent, all the instance in the room.
mm,
The person who is displaying that type of behavior may not be the most stable. And if you are placating to them and giving them what they want, you could get off mission fast. So everybody's always
mm,
watching to see who's leadership material, especially in this day and age when we have a lot of vacancies in the industry. The challenge is the industry doesn't promote boundaries themselves, but they love people with boundaries. Right? You see them
mm,
in the C-suites. They're making the hard decisions. They're saying no. they're making a tough decision saying, no, we don't want to accept that gift. We cannot accept that gift. It's dangerous for us to accept that gift. Or maybe we need to turn this board member off because they're no longer being productive. Or I've got to make a decision and step in that this volunteer is harassing a staff member before we get hit with a lawsuit. All of those, you two probably talk about on the podcast, are difficult decisions, can be challenging conversations. But when, as an organization, you have your boundaries in place and you foster boundaries in individuals, it's a lot easier.
I'm curious because for some people, there's different layers of the boundaries. There's the organization boundary and then also the personal boundaries.
Yes.
And you've mentioned people pleasers. When somebody identifies as, well, I am a nice person, I really care about people, and therefore I need to be nice to people. So that's their nice identity. What kind of new identity they could step into to be able to create those boundaries?
It's a great question, Lucie, and I'm hit with that question a lot. Are you a nice person, first of all, or are you kind? And are you leadership material? There is a race to leadership. Everybody wants leadership, but sometimes we want the perks and benefits of leadership without um, what I would label as the tough times in leaders. Like right now is a tough time if you're a leader in a nonprofit across the board. I don't care if it's healthcare, if you're in higher ed, social services, you have to make cuts, you have to make decisions. So how does NICE play out? Does NICE protect the organization? Does NICE do that? Two, this is where whether or not you're a charity or you're a nonprofit. Charities are nice. Nonprofits are kind, but they make tough decisions in order to serve and protect the communities they partner with. If they do not do that, they are of very little value to the communities they partner with. And that starts internally. So I am a recovering person who really depended on pleasing people. When I say depend, meaning my nervous system would just run amok if I thought somebody was unhappy with me. That's part of leadership. People are going to be unhappy with you. They're going to be angry. It doesn't mean it's forever, but it means that you will have to sit in a room, in a space with yourself or with others, and people are in conflict. And that can be tough for people who are nice. And I would say to that person, you probably are experiencing emotional challenges right now that we have a slew of labels for. Chris, you know this better than I do. And you probably have some physical ailments because that anxiety and stress, it takes another shape and form in our bodies. Which, in reply to your question, that's not nice because you're not being nice to yourself. You're being nice to everybody else. You can be kind to other people, but I need to be nice to myself and say no.
Could you define nice and kind the way you're using it? Because I think it's a really good distinction for people. So could you define them just so people have a more just a better way to grasp it?
I look at it between being I can have empathy for someone in a certain situation and still make a tough decision. And I can behave in a kind manner while I'm doing it, but it does not negate the fact that I still have to make the decision or I still have to have the conversation. So, Chris, I can pull you aside and you and I can talk about you being late. And I actually had this happen. You're late. You're chronically late. Your team members are saying you're late. I walked in the door as a leader and people pulled me aside and said, that person's late. We can't do anything about it. I had several kind conversations with this individual, and a person who for literally 5 years was walking in the door at 10 o'clock. I'm waving at leadership, started showing up at 8. I did it in a kind manner, but I was persistent. I was insistent. And I let them know, you're getting there. It's 9:30. You waved at me at 9:30. Let's wave at me at 9. Okay. You're getting there. Had I been nice like everyone else who had come before me, it would have been, oh, I would have been sympathetic instead of empathetic.
Hmm.
So I sympathize with the person. Well, I understand why you can't be here at 8. No one else understands. They don't have your challenges. You're special. You're unique. And I don't want you to be angry at me. So I'm going to over sympathize with this situation and at risk of making an exception that's very visible to the rest of the team and allowing this person to get away with things. So therefore, it's harder for me as a leader to correct other behavior on my team.
Hmm.
So sympathy is nice, kind. I'm empathetic. I understand what's going on at home. Still, we're going to need you to be here at 8. Maybe you and I can talk through on ways that we can support you to make that happen.
Mm. I'm sure you Angela and Lucy have probably heard this from your clients before, but the idea that they often think that being assertive means I can't be empathic or kind anymore. I have to just be almost aggressive in that. Um, what aside from that, like what other mistakes do you think people are making when they're thinking about setting boundaries?
So one of the mistakes that I see and that I have done is I've hesitated in setting a boundary because I felt like I had to vocalize it immediately, that I could not set a boundary through my behavior, my posture, a change in behavior, or something as simple as at the end of my email signature, I could put, I answer emails between the hours of 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. If you're sending this after 1 p.m., I'll reply back to you the next day. That's setting a boundary.
Hmm.
And if you do that as a team member and your leader says, "Hey, let's rethink," now you can have a conversation. "Let's rethink this, Angela. We actually need you to reply to emails quicker." And then you two can have a conversation about, is that really necessary? Or if I've stated this, do you think I'm giving the look that I'm not looking at my emails from 1 to 5 p.m.? Because you're correct, I'm working on my work, so I'm making sure that I'm not
Mm.
distracted. Do you think that board member will be okay if they understand that I'm not answering after 5 p.m.? So
Mm.
now you can have a conversation about the boundaries without walking in the door into your leadership's door and saying, "I am not answering emails after 5 p.m. I'm really sick of you doing this," and da 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 da.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You didn't set a boundary. That's the second mistake I see people make, is that they set a boundary, they haven't communicated the boundary, or they get mad because somebody ran into a boundary. I ran into
Mm.
Chris's boundary. Chris did not tell me that he's not going to answer that chat at 7 a.m.
Yeah. Yep.
So I didn't know Chris reacted negatively. And now he's being what we would call negatively assertive in telling me about his boundary. But if we're able to have these open conversations, it's a lot easier. Even starting with a new organization, you can have those conversations up front. This is my email signature. What are the expectations on chat? And what are the expectations on this? So you can have those conversations. And you look like a leader, not what I would call a whiner. And I was
Mm.
a whiner. They don't know, they don't understand. I mean, shouldn't they know they shouldn't text me at 10 p.m.? And I
Can't
gotta answer them. And how's
can't they
everybody
read your
else's
mind?
fault? They didn't read my mind, Chris. And I am tired of these non-ESP having people.
Yep.
So would you say when somebody finds themselves whining, complaining, and feeling resentful or like this is not fair, would that
Mhm.
be one of the signs that there is a boundary issue? Or what would be something that can help people identify, maybe I should communicate or set or even identify the boundary?
So, Lucy, I believe within myself that there was a time when I wanted to whine and I wanted to stay in that whiny situation versus when I was ready to change. So the boundary is when you're ready to change. If you are continuously whining or you're asking for advice or you just want people to hear your story over and over again, there's a place that you can go that somebody will listen to that and you can pay them well.
Hmm.
But at work, and this is the challenge, is that at work, we are expected, even though it's not said, even though it's not in the rule book or the handbook, or you may learn this because a sponsor or a mentor has pulled you aside. It's expected that we don't whine if we want to go up the ladder. Because when we're in a problem-solving mode, it's not done in tones of whininess. It's done in tones of precision, in tones of collaboration, in tones of a steady, consistent mood. Not melting down because such and such emailed you again. Did you tell such and such? So that's the area that I like working with people in because there's a large part of accountability that's included in it, which means that our destiny is up to us. It's not up to other people. So we can change. That's the easy
Mm.
part. The hard part is whether or not you realize you want to change.
Mm. Have you ever heard that quote? Change is mandatory, growth is optional.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a good one too.
Love that. Yeah. Love that.
Hmm.
So Angela, I'm curious. I'd love to see if we could role play some of these scenarios and see how you would navigate these conversations and these relationships, if that's okay with you.
Yes, it's my favorite thing to do because it prepares people.
That's the end of part 1 of our interview with Angela Barnes. Stay tuned for next week when we jump into role plays with her.